The story of Arabia, from prehistory to the rise of Islam. Long before Riyadh skyscrapers and the oil wealth that reshaped world politics, Arabia was already a crossroads of civilizations. Carved cities, ancient trade routes, and monuments still whisper across its deserts. Yet for many, the land is imagined only as empty sand, waiting for Islam to arrive. The truth is far older. Arabia was a stage of human triumphs, struggles, and connections that stretched across continents. Prehistoric Arabia, the first settlers. Tens of thousands of years ago, the Arabian Peninsula looked nothing like the desert we know today. Instead of endless dunes, it was covered with green grasslands, rivers, and lakes. Elephants, hippos, lions, and wild cattle roamed freely. For early humans leaving Africa, Arabia was a natural passage. Archaeologists now believe one of the first great migrations of Homo sapiens, over 120,000 years ago, passed directly through this land. Stone tools scattered across ancient lakes prove their presence, while fossilized footprints preserved in northwestern Saudi Arabia give us the oldest evidence of humans on the peninsula, 100,000 years before the pyramids of Egypt. Ancient Arabian kingdoms, the Mud, Lycian, Nabateans. By the first millennium BCE, Arabia was home to thriving kingdoms. The Mud carved homes directly into sandstone cliffs. Their rock-cut architecture, still visible today, was so famous that Assyrian records spoke of them. The Lycianites ruled from their capital at Dayton, near modern Alula. Between the 6th and 2nd centuries BCE, they controlled caravan routes connecting southern Arabia to Mesopotamia. They developed their own script, leaving inscriptions that shaped the future Arabic alphabet. The Nabateans rose around the 4th century BCE. Known for Petra in Jordan, their influence extended deep into Saudi Arabia. At Madain Salih, Al-Hijr, their monumental tombs, carved into rose-colored cliffs, stand as UNESCO World Heritage treasures. Their architecture blended Arabian, Mesopotamian, and Hellenistic styles, reflecting their global connections. These kingdoms grew rich on trade. The Arabian Peninsula became the bridge linking Africa, Asia, and the Mediterranean. The frankincense and spice routes. Arabia's greatest treasure was frankincense and myrrh, resins harvested in the south, modern Yemen, and Oman. These were worth more than gold in antiquity. They carried spiritual weight, burned in temples from Egypt to Rome, and used in medicines and perfumes. Long camel caravans carried these resins north, alongside cinnamon, pepper, precious stones, and silks. Arabia became a scented Silk Road, connecting India, Africa, and the Mediterranean. The demand was so great that when Emperor Nero's wife died in 65 CE, Rome burned an entire year's worth of frankincense at her funeral. Southern Arabian kingdoms grew immensely wealthy, financing temples, irrigation systems, and fortified cities. Caravan routes built oases, forts, and wells, binding Arabia to faraway empires. Though many kingdoms eventually fell, the trade routes they created remained, leaving Arabia known as the land of fragrance and wealth. Mecca, the Kaaba, and pre-Islamic Arabia. By late antiquity, Mecca had become Arabia's most important city. Its location gave it both economic and spiritual power. Caravans from South Arabia, Africa, and India passed nearby. Merchants stopped to trade, fueling Mecca's prosperity. At the center stood the Kaaba, a cube-shaped shrine housing idols of different tribes. Pilgrimage to Mecca was already widespread, long before Islam. Tribes brought offerings, performed rituals, and gathered for markets. Poetry, the lifeblood of Arabian culture, flourished here. Celebrated verses were even displayed at the Kaaba. Mecca was a cosmopolitan city, exposed to goods and ideas from Byzantium, Persia, Africa, and beyond. Its black stone, revered as sacred even in pre-Islamic times, symbolized the link between heaven and earth. Mecca was prepared, economically, culturally, and spiritually, for change. Prophet Muhammad and the rise of Islam. In 570 CE, Muhammad ibn Abdullah was born in Mecca. Known as Al-Amin, the trustworthy, he gained respect as an honest merchant. At age 40, while meditating in a cave, he received revelations through the angel Gabriel. These became the Quran. His message was simple but revolutionary: one God, justice, generosity, and equality. This threatened Mecca's elite, who controlled trade and idols of the Kaaba. Muhammad and his followers were persecuted, mocked, and attacked. Yet the message spread, especially among the poor and marginalized. In 622 CE, Muhammad and his followers migrated to Medina in the Hijra. This was more than a journey. It marked the birth of the Muslim community. In Medina, Muhammad became both prophet and leader, drafting the Constitution of Medina to unite tribes and faiths. Arabia under the caliphates. After Muhammad's death, leadership passed to the Rashidun caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. They preserved unity and expanded outward with astonishing speed, reaching Syria, Egypt, Persia, and beyond. Arabia, once peripheral, now stood at the heart of a vast empire. Under the Umayyads, 661 CE, the capital shifted to Damascus. Arabia lost political dominance, but Mecca and Medina remained the spiritual core. Pilgrimage became a symbol of legitimacy, drawing caravans of tens of thousands across the desert. Under the Abbasids, 750 CE, the capital moved to Baghdad. Yet Arabia remained vital. The holy cities were renovated and supported with wealth from across the empire. Mecca became not only a center of faith, but also of knowledge, where pilgrims brought medical treatises, astronomy charts, and new sciences. Arabia's deserts became the meeting ground of faith and learning, echoing across the Islamic world. The Ottomans and the holy cities. In the early 1500s, the balance of power in Arabia shifted dramatically. The Ottoman Empire, already a dominant force from North Africa to southeastern Europe, extended its authority over the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. For the sultans, this was more than conquest. By taking control of Islam's most sacred sites, they claimed legitimacy as caliphs, leaders of the Muslim world. They became the guardians of the Kaaba in Mecca and the Prophet's mosque in Medina, carrying the responsibility of protecting and maintaining the shrines visited by millions of pilgrims. But the Ottomans understood that ruling Arabia required more than titles. They invested heavily in infrastructure. The Kaaba and the Prophet's mosque were renovated, walls and courtyards restored, roads improved, and wells repaired. Pilgrimage routes from Damascus, Cairo, and Istanbul became safer and more accessible, supported by armed escorts against desert raids. Caravans numbering in the thousands crossed the deserts, tents and camels stretching beyond the horizon. To observers, these convoys symbolized the unifying power of faith across a vast empire. While the Ottomans retained sovereignty, local governance often remained in the hands of the sharifs of Mecca, descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. This delicate balance between imperial oversight and local authority gave Ottoman rule legitimacy on the ground. The seriousness of their guardianship was clear in projects like the Ayyad Fortress, built in the 18th century above Mecca to defend against threats. Just as striking was the annual Sir procession, in which a grand convoy left Istanbul carrying gold, gifts, and supplies for the holy cities. It was both aid and a message. Mecca and Medina belonged to all Muslims under Ottoman protection. The Wahhabi Saudi alliance and the First Saudi state. In the mid-1700s, a religious reformer emerged in Central Arabia. Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, born in Najd in 1703, argued that Muslims had strayed from the pure teachings of Islam. Practices like venerating saints, visiting shrines, or introducing rituals were, in his eyes, dangerous innovations. His call was uncompromising: return to the Islam of the Prophet and his companions. On its own, his vision might have remained local. But in 1744, he forged an alliance with Muhammad ibn Saud, ruler of the small town of Diriyah. Religious reform merged with political ambition. Together, they founded what became the first Saudi state. The alliance spread quickly, unifying tribes through faith and force. By the early 1800s, Wahhabi Saudi forces had captured much of Central Arabia, even seizing Mecca and Medina. Controlling Islam's holiest cities gave them enormous prestige, but their strict practices, such as banning tobacco, music, and long-standing customs, shocked many pilgrims. Abdulaziz ibn Saud and the capture of Riyadh, 1902. At dawn in January 1902, Abdulaziz led just 60 men in a daring raid on Riyadh. Disguised and entering under cover of night, they stormed the old fort. Fierce fighting followed, but by sunrise, the banner of the House of Saud once again flew over Riyadh. This bold strike marked the rebirth of Saudi power. Abdulaziz, only 26, did not rush expansion. Instead, he consolidated Najd, forging alliances and building loyalty through both negotiation and faith. His fighters, the Ikhwan, disciplined tribesmen inspired by religious zeal, became the backbone of his campaigns. The capture of Riyadh was not just a military victory. It was a symbol. The House of Saud had returned, and this time it would endure. The road to unification, 1902 to 1932. Over the next 3 decades, Abdulaziz expanded his rule step by step. In 1913, he captured Al-Hassa, the fertile eastern province on the Persian Gulf. Even the Ottomans acknowledged his control rather than risk war. In the 1920s, he turned westward to the Hijaz. After defeating the Hashemite rulers, he entered Mecca and Medina in 1925, becoming guardian of the holy cities. In Assur, the mountainous southern region, he used both diplomacy and force to secure loyalty. By the late 1920s, his realm stretched across Arabia. He reinforced unity through generosity, lavish feasts with hundreds of camels slaughtered for tribal guests, and through his personal charisma. Finally, on September 23, 1932, Abdulaziz proclaimed the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, uniting Najd, Hijaz, Al-Hassa, and Assur. For the first time in centuries, Arabia stood as one kingdom under a single ruler. The discovery of oil and early development. For centuries, Arabia's economy depended on the Hajj pilgrimage, date farming, and small-scale trade. The new kingdom, though unified, was poor and resource-scarce. Few could imagine that beneath the sand lay reserves that would transform not just Arabia, but the modern world. In 1933, Saudi Arabia signed an agreement with American geologists to search for oil. At first, drilling yielded disappointment. But in 1938, at Dammam Well No. 7, nicknamed the Prosperity Well, commercial oil was struck. The discovery was revolutionary. Aramco, the Arabian American oil company, expanded rapidly, building pipelines, ports, and towns. Tankers carried Saudi oil across the globe. Abdulaziz wisely invested the new wealth into building a state. Roads replaced camel tracks. Clinics and hospitals appeared. Schools spread literacy. Electricity reached towns that had never seen modern technology. Partnership with the United States deepened. For America, Saudi Arabia offered oil. For the Saudis, America provided expertise, equipment, and protection. Unlike colonial ties that bound much of the Middle East, this was a partnership of mutual interest. Saudi Arabia, From War to Vision 2030. World War II and early U.S. ties. When World War II erupted in 1939, Saudi Arabia was still a young kingdom unified by Ibn Saud's campaigns. Officially neutral, the kingdom avoided military involvement but could not escape the war's reach. Oil, newly discovered near Iran in 1938, suddenly became critical for modern warfare. Air fleets, naval forces, and mechanized armies consumed petroleum at unprecedented levels, and both Britain and the United States recognized Saudi Arabia's strategic importance. While production was modest compared to Iran or Iraq, Aramco's operations steadily tied Saudi oil to allied supply chains. The war also strained Saudi finances. Pilgrimage revenues, the kingdom's economic backbone, fell sharply due to travel restrictions. Oil royalties quickly became a lifeline. In February 1945, as the war neared its end, a historic meeting took place aboard the USS Quincy between President Franklin D. Roosevelt and King Ibn Saud. It was the first encounter between a U.S. president and Saudi monarch, establishing the foundation of a partnership. American access to Saudi oil in exchange for recognition, technical assistance, and long-term security guarantees. That handshake launched a relationship that has endured for more than 80 years. The oil boom and transformation, 1950s, 1970s. By the 1950s, Saudi Arabia was no longer a forgotten desert state. Oil revenues fueled rapid modernization. Highways replaced camel trails. Ports and airports connected the kingdom to the world, and cars filled roads where once caravans moved slowly across the desert. Health and education also advanced dramatically. Hospitals with Western-trained doctors opened, clinics spread across towns, and universities such as King Saud University in Riyadh began producing Saudi professionals. Oil wealth allowed the monarchy to extend its reach, fund ministries, and modernize governance without falling into foreign debt. Aramco played a central role, building not just drilling sites, but entire communities with schools, housing, and clinics. By the 1970s, Saudi Arabia had become one of the world's top oil exporters and a leading voice within OPEC. The 1973 oil crisis. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 marked a turning point. After the U.S. and Europe backed Israel, Saudi Arabia joined an Arab oil embargo against those nations. Oil prices quadrupled in months, sparking economic shocks worldwide. The embargo revealed oil's political power. For the first time, Saudi Arabia demonstrated its ability to influence global markets and international policy. Western nations realized their security was tied not only to military alliances, but also to Saudi energy decisions. At home, skyrocketing oil revenues transformed daily life, funding new schools, hospitals, housing projects, and modern infrastructure. The kingdom shifted from modest oil producer to a central global power. The 1979 Grand Mosque seizure. In November 1979, militants led by Jahaman al-Otabai seized Mecca's Grand Mosque, accusing the monarchy of corruption and calling for a messianic leader. The battle lasted nearly 2 weeks, with militants entrenched in courtyards, towers, and underground tunnels. Saudi forces, with discreet French assistance, eventually retook the mosque, but at great cost. The crisis shook the monarchy's legitimacy, prompting it to strengthen ties with conservative clerics and enforce stricter social rules to preserve authority. The event revealed how fragile control over the kingdom's holiest sites could appear, leaving a deep mark on Saudi domestic policy. The Gulf War and U.S. alliance, 1990 to 1991. Iraq's 1990 invasion of Kuwait placed Saudi Arabia at risk of Saddam Hussein's expansion. Fearing for survival, King Fahd invited U.S. and coalition forces into Saudi territory, marking the largest foreign military presence in the kingdom's history. Saudi Arabia became the staging ground for coalition operations, air campaigns, and the liberation of Kuwait. The war cemented the U.S.-Saudi security partnership, oil in exchange for military protection. However, the presence of foreign troops near Mecca and Medina fueled radical opposition, a backlash that shaped Islamist militancy in the years to follow. Post 9/11 challenges and reforms. The September 11, 2001 attacks, carried out mostly by Saudi nationals, brought unprecedented scrutiny to the kingdom. Critics pointed to its religious and educational systems as fueling extremism. Saudi Arabia launched crackdowns on militants, reformed curricula, and expanded education. Women gained gradual rights, municipal elections were introduced, and large numbers of Saudi students were sent abroad under the King Abdullah Scholarship Program. Despite tensions, Saudi Arabia deepened its role as a U.S. partner in counterterrorism, sharing intelligence and combating networks both inside and outside the kingdom. Vision 2030 and the future. In 2016, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman unveiled Vision 2030, a roadmap to reduce reliance on oil and diversify the economy. The plan emphasizes technology, renewable energy, tourism, and social reforms. Megaprojects such as NEOM, a futuristic city planned on the Red Sea, symbolize the ambition to turn Saudi Arabia into a hub of innovation. Renewable energy initiatives, restored heritage sites, and expanded tourism aim to reshape the kingdom's image. Socially, reforms have been dramatic. The ban on women driving was lifted, cinemas reopened, and cultural events flourished. Yet, challenges remain, balancing modernization with tradition, addressing human rights concerns, and maintaining political stability. If successful, Vision 2030 could transform Saudi Arabia from an oil-dependent state into a diversified economy, leading in innovation and cultural influence. The oil kingdom may yet redefine itself for the post-oil age.